Welcome, everyone, to episode 1 of the MBE Enterprise Podcast, where we talk about money, business, and entrepreneurship. I'm here with our first ever guest, investment analyst Matt Gendreau. Matt, how are we doing today, man?
Doing great today, Thielen. I've been looking forward to this for a really long time, and I'm just absolutely stoked to be a part of episode 1 here. And yeah, let's get it.
Dude, I can't tell you how excited I am, Matt. And I just want to get it rolling right away here, honestly, with this first question. It's not a question directly related to making money, right? But it's actually talking about giving money, which can be just important, really. Matt, how do you approach philanthropy and giving back to the community as your financial success naturally grows?
I think philanthropy is a really important part of, or should be an important part of everyone's life, just because everybody has some sort of a cause that they're really passionate about, whether it's for religious reasons, maybe it's political things, or just things they're passionate about and that they care about. So I think it's a great way to, not only just because of the obligation, some people feel obligated to give back, but it also impacts your legacy and just everything you do and just how you feel about yourself. So personally, my approach is, I've considered a lot of different things, but one thing I noticed was on my way to work every day, and I know a lot of people encounter this, especially in the cities or more concentrated areas, but there's a lot of homeless people, and there's all the debates out there about whether or not you should give them money because, are you enabling them or making their life worse? But also with our current understanding now, it's not like it was, even years ago. Addiction is more of a disease than it is just a choice. Maybe they made a choice at some point in their lives if they are struggling with those kind of things, but that choice is well in the past, and so much of it is just mental health, and that combined with a lot of other things, or people don't know how to take advantage of the resources out there. So what I decided to start doing was, I don't even know if you'd call it an initiative, but I just went out and I got a bunch of McDonald's gift cards, and I also just keep my eye out on Facebook Marketplace for things like tents, stuff like that. And I've gotten in the habit of, when I do see a homeless person, just stop and talk to them. And first, just ask them for their name and what their prayer intentions are, and that's enough just to get them talking. They feel seen, they feel like a person, and they'll tell you a lot. Sometimes it'll be something totally wild, and sometimes it's something they wound up there because of something that could happen to you or I. And I think the reason why I chose the McDonald's gift card is because that's a pretty direct. There's McDonald's everywhere, and you know what it's going to. It's going to help them out, and it might just brighten their day, making them feel seen. So that's just something in my life that's, it's really kind of helped me too. Just get me sort of grounded. And like you and I, Thielen, we've had lots of opportunity in our lives, and some people just don't get dealt as good of a hand of cards. So I think it's great to just be aware, and in a good way that I like to help out. So
No, that's honestly amazing. Like, I'm thinking to myself right now, I feel like I just threw you a layup of a first question. Like, I had no idea about that. I had no idea about that going in. And that's honestly so amazing what you're doing. I had no idea, but like, I just can't even express it right now. That's really awesome. I think that's something that everyone can learn from, right? Because, I mean, not only is doing something like that, I love the part where you mentioned you talk to them, right? You start a conversation. Like, just getting to know someone can just brighten their day so much. And this isn't a psychology podcast, right? But getting into the psychology of addiction too, like you mentioned, a lot of times it's like a rabbit hole that you get down, like not a YouTube rabbit hole or whatever, like learning wise, but a bad rabbit hole you get down, and it can be a downward spiral real quick, and it's hard to get out of. And like you mentioned, it could be one wrong move can change like everything. And yeah, you mentioned you come from a pretty fortunate place, and I think a lot of people come from pretty fortunate places overall, and they kind of take it for granted sometimes, right? Like, well, like you'll be complaining about, oh, I just was listening to an episode of Joe Rogan actually, and he's talking to Zach Bryan, the country singer, and they're talking about Zach Bryan's talking about the amount of situations that people have to come out of that are extremely difficult, and yet we'll be complaining if our coffee doesn't taste right or this or that. And it's like really taking time to put things in perspective is insanely valuable, not only for you to help the world, but also you to help yourself, right? Like to help your own mindset and just not get too frustrated with problems that you have, because you don't always want to be thinking that, oh, it could be worse, right? But it could be worse, right? Like that's exactly what it is. So honestly, like I said, I had no idea about any of that. We were just trying to start it off on a generous foot in a way, and you absolutely blew that out of water. That's amazing.
Yeah, I guess what I would say inspired it too is, it's my dad's a firefighter, and he says he has his what they call their client base, right? And it's the less fortunate of the population, people that are really struggling, and they know most of them by name just because I see them on such a regular basis. And myself, I'm guilty of it too. But it's so easy to see a homeless person and think, why don't you just get a job? You could be spending all this time doing something as simple as flipping patties at McDonald's, or doing something that you'd think would be so easy to do. But just the amount of mental health issues and just things that are going on in these people's lives is they can't. Like 90% of them could not, even if they really willed it. Like they just really can't. So that's kind of what inspired it. And some things that have came from these conversations have really, really impacted me. Like sometimes I'll ask them, what are your prayer intentions? They'll tell me a few things, and they'll say, well, what can I pray for you? Like they genuinely, like they care, and that's always really striking to me too. And just the other day, this was actually yesterday, I've been saving up for this car that I've wanted for quite a while. I finally got it. And it's a pretty kind of a sporty looking car, And so I pull up, give this girl a McDonald's gift card. We're talking for a bit, and she says, I like your car. Is that something you've always wanted? And I was like, yeah, I have for a while. And she's like, oh, does that make you happy? And I was like, yeah, like it does. But after hearing what she just said, I said, what can I pray for you? She said, just pray that I'll live through tomorrow. And that really just struck me. It's like, look what I'm worried about. Look what I'm so concerned about and working so hard for. And she's in this position too. Another human being on the same level. So, it's really been eye-opening for me. And I've learned to really, really love it. So
that's awesome. And one thing I wanted to mention too, that you brought up, the fact that you don't just give them money and walk away, right? But having a conversation. And I know I already brought this up, but volunteering and giving your time, which, is exactly what you're doing, can be so much more valuable than just simply, handing someone a $5 bill and going on your way. Like it's unbelievable the difference that makes, and you could be changing people's lives. And that's honestly amazing.
That's really true. And it's interesting you say that because, especially our point in our lives, Matt, is everything's an opportunity cost. I'll probably bring this up again down the road in this podcast, but something I think about a lot is what are you spending your time doing, and what are you doing to grow in these crucial years post graduation? You and I both graduated in the past year, and it's sort of like the rat race begins, right? Like some people are working 80 to 100 hours a week. In your free time, you better be reading self-help books or doing something in the gym, always to grow. And time is money. Like we have these opportunities too, and we could be out making money. And you don't necessarily just have to. It's not about just setting aside 10%, whatever it is, of your paycheck to give to these good causes. Your time is just as valuable, if not more, and can be more impactful too. Just your personal touch, and you learn a lot more from it too. So that's another great form of philanthropy, if not financially. So
yeah, no, that's very true. And you, like, really, it comes down to the fact that there's a lot more to life than just money, right? And it's easy to say that for anyone on the planet that has money, obviously, and not even like I'm saying I'm rich, but I'm just saying like anyone that's not struggling week to week or month to month, right? It's easy for people to say that, and then other people to look at it and be like, it's all about this, right? But in reality, have you ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
I can't say I've heard of it, no.
Highly recommend. It's about, essentially a person's experience in Auschwitz and their mindset and how they, came out of it. But that's just something right there that it can give you a whole new perspective on just life. And then when you're thinking about like, I'm just grinding. I'm grinding 12 hours a day. All I'm trying to do is make money, 14 hours, 16 hours. Like I'm sleeping the bare minimum. I'm doing everything the bare minimum, and I just want to make money. Then you make all the money in the world. You buy everything you thought you wanted. You get it. And it doesn't change your life at all, right? The experiences along the way are what change your life, not whatever you bought. And, in some cases, like, for example, your car situation, that's something where you had that as, a lifelong goal. Like you've wanted that for a while, and then you worked hard, you got it, and it paid off, right? That's different than just being like scrolling through TikTok or scrolling through Amazon and be like, oh, I see this $2,000 watch I want to buy because I will look cool, fancy in front of my friends, and you buy it, wear it one time, and you're like, I kind of like my old one better. You know what I mean? Like you come to realize that sort of thing. And I mean, I feel like we covered that pretty well, Matt, and kind of on the topic of how you're spending your money, right? Whether it's to make more money, whether it's investing, whether it's buying something, expenses, whether it's philanthropy and donating. Another question I wanted to ask you is, what's your perspective on the balance between spending currently right away on something you want, and then also experiences and indulgences versus just saving every penny you have for the future so you can be a billionaire when you're 85?
Great question. Yeah, and that's definitely a hot topic today is, how much are you, in our situations, the housing market is ridiculous. Everything's expensive, and we're just starting off, most of us. Again, back to the point of just graduating, already facing a big hole of debt. So you better be saving constantly if you want to be comfortable in even 10 years. But I think the important thing too is, why are you doing it? Like why are you working so hard? It's because, the idea of delayed gratification and saving up, very important, very great, but you want to enjoy your life too. I mean, these are some of the best. Everyone talks about how it's the best years of their life are when they're younger. You get to do the most fun stuff. You have the least amount of responsibility. So I think you definitely need to throw it on a scale. And my personal take is that you shouldn't be so deprived of doing fun things and spending money that you're always missing out and just setting yourself back. I think it's okay to buy that expensive concert ticket because it's your favorite artist, or whatever it might be. Buy the watch that you're saving up for because you worked really hard for it. Like you have to reward yourself for working hard because you shouldn't overindulge, but it's a great way to remind yourself, like, I'm doing this for a reason, and just give yourself a piece of that payoff every once in a while. I think it makes it a lot easier to keep the vision in mind, and I think it's really important to just maintain a good quality of life, especially for your own mental health. It's going to be a long time before before any of us are comfortable and wealthy. So why suffer through it?
Yeah, no, I think that's all great. This is actually a topic that I've switched up on in the last couple of years, like not drastically, but when I was like 17, 18, that sort of age, end of high school, early college, I was like the ultra saver investor. Like I had a rule with myself. I was like, anything I buy that's just like a discretionary spending, which spending when you don't need to spend it, right? Discretionary spending, anything I would do like that, I had to 100% match it with an investment into equities markets, right? So that was a rule I had with myself. So if I went out and got Chick-fil-A for $20, I was putting $20 into the stock market that night. I had a rule like that. And, on the one hand, it's helped me because I have saved, right, enough to get by, like not have to worry about things drastically, right? Bills, that sort of thing right away. But at the same time, I missed out on a lot of stuff because I'd be like, I don't want to buy that. Like I'm gonna have to, if I buy that, I'm gonna have to spend another, say it's a $400 concert ticket or something insane, right? that would be awesome. Well, I'm going to have to spend $400 investing it, and it's actually costing me $800. So there's blessings of it in that it allowed me to save, and I was disciplined and diligent about it, but I also missed out on some things. And over the last year, I would say I kind of had a mindset shift on that from, my original mindset was I want to invest as much as possible because I want to retire by 25, right? That's always been my goal. And I want to clarify this. When I say retire, I do not mean sitting on a beach doing absolutely nothing or just, literally doing nothing. No, I mean passively running companies, right? But just not, my version of retire is not even retirement. It's just not working like a 9-to-5 office job. And so many people say that, and I feel like it's gotten so cliche now in a way, but that truly was it. I just didn't want to be tied down to an office. My retirement was still working, but just essentially from where I, wanted to be working from. And my mindset kind of shifted because I thought about it and I was like, okay, for me to retire, my form of, in quotes, retirement at 25, it's not going to happen through just investing in equities markets, right? I was like, I'm going to have to start a business at some point, and that's the route I'm going to have to go. And then tying along with that, I was like, if I'm going to start a business, it's going to be a grind, like you mentioned. And why would I want to just, you have to be grinding, but why would I want to just be constantly hating myself, right? I'm actually just starting to read the book 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And one of the things in that he talks about is taking mini vacations. And he's talking about when you get to a little more wealthy than I don't even want to say a number necessarily, but I don't know if you could pull this off. I haven't finished the book yet. I don't know if you could pull this off at say a 30, 40 grand a year, but he's talking about if you got 60,000 a year job, which I feel like in general, that's a solid salary, good salary, that you can pull some of this stuff off just by obviously knowing the loopholes that he talks about in his book. And that's why he wants you to buy the book and read it, obviously. But something like that, where it's not necessarily needing $1 billion, and I'm not going to get there investing, but if I could run a business that I can run from my computer and not have to be tied down to that location. One of the biggest things he mentioned in that book that really struck me as interesting was he's like, if you control the environment you work in, essentially, and the time that you work, that salary becomes 3 to 10 times as valuable as the salary where you're stuck in just an office or stuck in a particular location. Now, what does he mean by that? It's Tim Ferriss's words, not mine. What does he mean by that? Well, he talks about how you could have an office job that makes 300 grand. We'll even go less. We'll say 100 grand. Nice salary, $100,000, 9 to 5 every day, probably some overtime hours. It's probably a grind at that point. Or he's like, would you rather that? Or would you rather you have a job where you work essentially entirely from your computer? You can travel for the most part when you want, where you want, as long as you have your computer on you, for $40,000 a year. And I think that's an interesting question to ask people. And I'll ask you it afterward. But, it sounds so naive and dumb to be like, well, you don't know anything. Obviously, you take the $100,000. That's a huge difference. And it is, don't get me wrong. But I think people chase the money, and I'm young. I don't know anything. I'm stupid. Don't listen to what I say. But I think people chase the money, myself included at times, more than they chase, the life experiences that they actually want to have, because nobody wants the money. First little website business thing I ever started, one of the slogans was, investing buys you the freedom, it gets you the money, but nobody cares about the money. You want the time that the money can buy you, or the freedom that the money can buy you. So that $40,000 salary, if you can do those experiences still, do some of those things you want to do, but because you're not tied down to that office job, well, is that more valuable than the $100,000 where you can't do that stuff, or you have to take this week off in order to do that, or this or that? And that's what he's kind of talking about. The numbers and figures can change, right? But what he said was 3 to 10 times as valuable. And I really thought that was interesting, and it kind of struck me because I've kind of always thought that, but you kind of just put it into words on a piece of paper, and it's amazing how I have to bring this up again because I was just listening to this episode with Joe Rogan and Zach Bryan. But Zach Bryan was talking about how he loves songwriting, different realm. But he said it's amazing how words on a piece of paper can just make people feel emotions or totally change the way people think. And I think that's something that's fresh in my mind, and I found really interesting, and something too with books and reading. Like sometimes you can be reading too much almost in a way that where you're like, you think you're getting something done, but if you're learning it and you're not applying it, you're not actually really getting anywhere, as opposed to reading something really powerful and then putting it into action and applying it to whatever you may be doing. So, Gendreau, would you take $100,000 in an office 9 to 5 all the time, or $40,000 working from your computer and you could just go wherever you wanted when you wanted, essentially? And there is no right answer.
That's an interesting point, and I'll answer that kind of walking it back a minute to what you said. I think the point you're trying to make is one of my favorite sayings out there, is that are you working to live, or are you living to work? Some of the highest earners out there, some of the hardest workers, are also some of the most miserable people, just because of how much it impacts their personal lives, their families, all that they do give up in order to have that successful career and get that money. And it's also a complex, once some people get so sucked into this trap where you can always be working just a little bit more and making that much more money, and it just keeps increasing, and then you don't even you lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place. So I think it's really important for everyone to just sit back and evaluate, why am I grinding as hard as I can in the office and giving all these things up? Like, what am I working towards? Because if it really is just a large sum of money, then you're missing out on a lot of the best things in life. So, and back to our earlier point, that just comes down to prioritization. Back to our point of experience versus saving for the future. What are your priorities? Is it to, when do you want to have a good time? What do you want to spend what means the most to you? Like myself, relationships matter a lot to me. My relationships with my friends. I'd turn on a job that had too many hours, even if it was my dream job, just, if it meant that I had to sacrifice some of those things, because it's so important. So I think as long as you keep that in mind, then yeah, you'll stay on the right track, and that's how you'll eventually find happiness down the road. But there's a lot of traps out there, and it's really easy to get sucked into just being focused on making the most money, because there's a lot of opportunities for it if you do work for that. So, but, back to your last question there. I'd probably take the 40,000. Just for, again, because that's more opportunities beyond the job itself. And it's always, people like you and I are like-minded in that way. It's that we always want to be chasing something bigger than what's going on. The worst thing that you can do for yourself, especially as a young person, is becoming complacent in whether your work or your life. As long as you always have a goal in mind that's much bigger than what you have going on, attainable, or maybe even just beyond that scope, you'll stay growing. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, you mentioned growth at the end there. I think that's something that's huge. The edge of your comfort zone, right? You don't want to be so outside of your comfort zone so much that you just shut down, right? But doing things that put you on the edge of your comfort zone, that's how you grow. And once again, I'm dumb. I'm 22 years old. I don't know anything, right? But that's from what I've read, what I've seen, what I've witnessed, like that seems to be key. So doing that thing that you're like, I don't know if I want to do this, but I should probably do it. I just don't know. Do it. Like that's when you have to do it, right? I see things now and I'm like, I have thought about like getting a sales job recently, actually. Partly because, the commissions you can make, like you don't necessarily have a ceiling in certain situations where you might otherwise, but also just because I'm like, calling people on the phone or talking to people about trying to sell someone something, that's never been something that I'm like passionate about or like super love doing, right? But I've gotten to the point now that because that's how I feel, I'm like, I have to do that now, because if I'm going to have a business, like sales is such a huge aspect. That is business. Like, in a lot of ways, you can have the best product ever, you can have the best service of all time, but if you can't sell it to anyone, you're not making any money. Like, that's how it works. So that's something that I think is really important, just being on the edge of your comfort zone, like you said, and then allowing yourself that room to grow. And you'll look back on it and be like, wow, I'm so glad that I did that, right? Almost always, but you have to go out there and do it first.
Yeah, and if I could wind it back to just the topic of why, everybody's good at something, and we're designed to, everybody has their own skills. And back to the topic of just, your overall well-being and why you're doing it. Everybody just wants to be happy at the end of the day. And if you're not fulfilling what you were meant to do, and if you're not chasing the things you're good at and exercising those skills, you're probably not going to feel good about yourself all the time. So, just you just gotta keep that chase up and keep the goals in mind and keep grinding.
Very true. Very true. And moving on a little bit here, earlier you mentioned something about debt. And another question that I wanted to ask you is what's your perspective on the role of debt in business and personal finance? And those are two things, so we'll probably tackle those separately. And then how do you manage it effectively? So Matt, let's start with personal finance, since we're kind of on that topic, and then we're going to shift in a little more to business topics here.
Yeah, that's a whopper of a question, because it's always a gamble. The biggest roll of the dice that any young adult takes, you and I just did, is your college degree. It's, unless you have somebody who's paying for it for you, you're going to be in a pretty significant amount of debt to go to a good school. Even if you have good grades and earn those scholarships, you're still going to end up in a pretty big hole after you graduate. But, you look at the statistics, the average person with a degree makes, I don't know the exact number, but it's a couple million on average more than the person without. So it's in a way, it's a long-term investment just to your own career. And that's without starting your own business. That's just for being in the regular workforce. But so I think that's, you have to look at your goals. Like, if that's something that that you can follow through with and do, by all means do it. If you don't, you'll be shorting yourself. But then, what you mentioned about business, that's a whole different ballpark. Like you and I with our business, Circular Sands, just a brief little summary of it here. Matt and I, we've been working on this business of converting recyclable glass back into sand and then putting it in golf course bunkers to take the place of natural sand. That's, it's at a shortage right now in our product. We think it's more sustainable, higher performing, totally customizable. We think it's a great idea, but it's still in the works and we're grinding on it. But our biggest challenge right now is that, okay, if we want to build this warehouse and really pursue this idea, well, we'll be looking for $500,000 in funding. And we can back it up with stats. We can pitch it to people. Maybe we can get that funding, but assuming we'd be wanting to take on a certain amount of that debt for ourselves just to avoid giving away equity in the future, well, I mean, that's terrifying, because you look at what can happen if it doesn't work out, and it's such a big jump. Like, we're taking the blue ocean strategy. This is a thing that's not out there. We're going to be first to market. So, it's easy for your mind to race. Why isn't this being done already? Surely someone's thought of this. Why did it fail? What aren't we seeing? And maybe we're right. Maybe we're right, and it'll make us into multimillionaires, maybe billionaires. But if we're wrong, then our lives will be a heck of a lot more difficult for years to come than they are now, and it'll be a major setback. But so it's unique for everybody that's facing that. You at the end of the day, you got to work as hard as you can to find the best data, and you just got to throw it on the scale. But that's part of the jump, though, Matt. That's, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Everybody would have their own business, but it's not, and it's terrifying. And if you can get over that and take that jump, that's why people are rewarded so significantly with, all this success and money, because it's really hard to do, and few people can achieve it. Who knows? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But people who have the entrepreneurial mindset and just love running towards the sun constantly after one thing or another. It's part of the chase and it's fun, but yeah, can't say it's not a little daunting, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head right there, actually, when you mentioned kind of the entrepreneurial mindset, right? You got to fall in love with the game. You can't fall in love with what you think the outcome is going to be. And it's a similar lesson, like in general, to just life, right? You chase the experiences, you chase the freedom that money can give you. You don't chase the actual money itself. Like money is just a vehicle, right? To get you from whether it's point A to point B or whatever it may be. In that same way, like entrepreneurship, the game is what you have to fall in love with. If you fall in love with, oh, we're going to be millionaires, we're going to do this and that, everything's going to work perfectly. Like A, you'll lose sight of obstacles that are potentially going to come. You'll get too optimistic, this, that, the other thing. B, when you run into issues, you'll get overly pessimistic and you'll be like, oh, it's never going to work. I got to start something new. All that in general. And really it has to be the game that you enjoy. And once again, I feel like all this sounds so cliche because people talk about it so much now, the game, this or that, but that is what it is. Like if you're not in love with that, like I think about it now and I'm like, why did I want to start this podcast? Like part of it was networking and just connecting with people I know and listening, learning. That was a big reason too, just learning from some of the smartest, brightest minds of business that I know. I can't think of a better way to just, besides obviously just calling them up on the phone, but I'm like, oh, I could document it. I could look back on our conversations and learn from them even more. So learning and networking, big aspect of it. But I'm like, it's a podcast. Like I've never been interested in the software, the volume or video editing that goes into podcasting or like content creation in general. Like when it first got big, I was one of those people who would just roast TikTokers. I'd be like, what are you doing? You're dancing in front of a camera. Like, and obviously this isn't that, but at the same time, it's understanding that content creation, whether they understood it or not, that's like the future, right? It's the present, and I'm sure it has a large place in the future too. And so I'm like, well, if I really love the game, like, and I'm not straight up building a brick and mortar business, buying a piece of land and property and putting up a building and selling something directly. Like if I'm not doing that, well, the future is online. The present is online. We're seeing it across the country as far as like decreases in brick and mortar sales everywhere and upticks in online sales also everywhere. So like it's literally not even the future, it is the present. And someone like me, I was clearly behind the scenes starting this podcast now. Should have started it back in 2020. But I'm finally doing it now, and I started a couple along the way, but this one was the one that really felt like this is right. Like this is what I want to do, and these are the people I really want to talk to, and I think I can learn from. And so that's kind of the big reason. But just circling back around, classic business term right there, circling back around to what I started this with, just falling in love with the game. And I'm like, I don't love video editing. I don't love photo editing. I don't like the software behind the sound of a podcast, making sure stuff's right. Like I'm new to this. I just want to talk to these guys. But if I'm going to do that, I have to do this. And that the work is my vehicle to get to where I eventually want to go. And so there's work that needs to be done and I will do it. That's kind of the mindset I've taken with it.
Something I think is really underestimated or underappreciated in the entrepreneurial experience is just the power of failure. You gotta learn to, you almost gotta learn to like the taste of your own blood, right? The only true failure that comes is when you give up on something. But if you just keep pursuing it and you keep getting knocked down, well, that's when you learn the most. You're gonna learn more than you'll ever learn in any class, or especially through constant success. Because learning what not to do is going to teach you so many more lessons than anything else. And even if you fail, like pursuing something, you're still going to have great success through just networking, the people you'll meet, building the financial models that you did, building the whole business model. You're going to learn so much, and getting knocked down for that failure is just going to make you better equipped for the next idea that might have more potential to go. So, and you got to enjoy that too, right? you gotta enjoy the downsides of it too, because that's where you really do learn the most. And that's what you and I have learned too in our experiences is, both of us have had several entrepreneurial, ventures that maybe we're still working on them. Maybe they have potential. Some of them don't. Some of them flopped, but thank God for every one of them though.
Exactly. You can't get to where you are today without everything you've done in the past. And that's why I like when people talk about living with no regrets. And when I say that, I don't mean like if you did a bunch of stupid stuff, like you're going to regret it. But living, I love the expression YOLO, not for the reason that most people say YOLO, right? Most people say YOLO, you only live once, just to as an excuse to like do something dumb. You know what I mean? Like it's just totally an excuse to do something that's not actually productive. And it might be fun, like there might be a time and a place for it, like we talked about earlier. But I love YOLO because, yeah, you only live once. So you have one life, you got one shot to be what you want to be who you want to be, accomplish what you want to accomplish, live to your full potential. Like I feel like that should be everyone's goal, is to be the best person they can be, right? Accomplish what they can accomplish and love the process. So that's why, side note, why I love YOLO. But you also mentioned the failure aspect of it and learning from failure. And that got my mind thinking. Another topic I wanted to talk about that is all about avoiding failure in the first place is mentorship. And what's kind of your thoughts on the role of mentorship in entrepreneurship, especially, but even just business as a whole, or just honestly life as a whole, really?
I mean, I think it's crucial to any success that you're pursuing wherever. If you're just going on it all by yourself and figuring everything out for the first time, you're going to have way more challenges and you're going to be set back a lot more. And it's really just, you don't have to learn everything the hard way. By having a good mentor, it can save you a lot of time and a lot of hardship. And it's one of the that's been one of the biggest contributors to my growth, especially through my college career, especially in my internship and in my current job, is just um, always having, again, about goals, just always having something to look up to, having a person to look up to, and just seeing, you want to be like them someday. And you can see not only, okay, how does this person act in a board meeting? How do they conduct themselves in the workplace? It's not just about that. It's about how do they go about their lives? How do they go about their well-being and their health? Or their relationships with people, and all these things that ultimately contribute to you being successful in the workplace. There's a lot that goes into, what's going to set you up for a good day at work, and all that. So I think it's really important to always have somebody to go to for advice and somebody you're looking up to, and that's been one of the biggest contributors to where I am today. My dad the most, and also just really great bosses, and also mentors at St. Thomas and at school that I've had so far. It's been just such a significant factor in all of that. So
For sure. And anytime you're talking about mentorship, you also have to think of keeping your ego in check. And I say this from a personal perspective of when I was younger, I just wanted to do everything my way because I was like, I know how to do it. I don't need, not so much my way, I guess, of like bossing other people around, but more so my way of like, I don't need a mentor. I'm going to figure it out on my own. Right. I have this ego and I'm like, I'm going to do it myself. I don't need anyone to help me. Like, I don't want anyone's help. Like, I just want to do it on my own and accomplish it myself. And I think there's something to be said for that attitude still in a way, because I think you kind of have to have that attitude in a way if you're really going to have the mindset in the first place of trying to accomplish something great, whatever realm it might be in. But you also have to check that. And that's something that's changed in my life also, is checking that ego and being like, if I really want to get there, like, would I rather do it just my way, or should I be smart about this, talk to someone who's done it already, get their perspective on it? And then, like you said, it still might be hard, but you won't be learning it the hardest possible way, right? You'll just be learning it the hard way instead, or the easy way. People like to say easy way versus hard way, but I like the saying of, learn it the hard way as opposed to the hardest possible way with no help at all, right?
yeah, you have to be good at identifying what are the qualities that make your mentor a good example to look up to. Like, for example, maybe you have a boss that's taught you, everything there is to know about some aspect of business, but nobody in the workplace likes them because they're, really hot-headed, really obnoxious, full of themselves. There's plenty of people out there like that too. So, you have to be careful which qualities that you that you pick and choose to look up to, because it's easy to also see, yeah, this person's great, I want to be just like them. But you know, you'll have so many mentors throughout your lives, and if you just take the best qualities and try and see what they do that makes them successful, see the best things, and take those things for yourself. And yeah, that's how I've gotten the most from it myself. So.
Yeah, I actually just read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, pretty popular one in business. And one of the things it says in there is, I think he was actually quoting some previous, someone like Vanderbilt or Rockefeller. It was someone like that just said, or maybe it was even Ben Franklin, I can't remember. And it was something about, there's something to be learned. Everyone has something you can learn from them, right? Everyone is an expert in something, and everyone knows at least one thing, probably a lot more than one thing, better than you do. So there is something to be learned from everyone. And I think that's a huge thing too, of just going and talking to anyone on the street. Be like, this person knows something more than me. Like, I can have this big ego. I could be making $20 million, $400 million a year. They could be working at McDonald's, and there's a handful of stuff, probably a lot more than that, that they know way better than I do and that I can learn from them. And just having that mindset of always wanting to learn and always wanting to improve really also ties into that entrepreneurial mindset in general, because it's all about learning. That is entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship is a synonym for problem solving, is what I like to say, because that's all you're ever doing is problem solving. So just knowing that you can learn something from everyone, and then finding a mentor that you can learn exactly what you need to be learning at that time, or at least very close to it, can be absolutely crucial to the development, and probably is absolutely crucial to the development of almost everyone who's ever become extremely successful as far as business and entrepreneurship goes. And tying in along the lines of mentorship as well, I have another question, and it's, what was the most impactful lesson a mentor taught you, and why in particular?
Yeah, I'd have to say, in my internship, I learned, this was during a sales role. I was doing some sales and some hiring, but my boss told me, you don't really know what you're doing at first, especially when you were dealing with people who are, really high up positions, or you're hiring somebody for a high up position, or trying to sell some really big product. It's daunting. You almost feel like you're not supposed to be doing it, because it's so new and you don't know as much as you feel like you should. But one rule that I've always held pretty steadfast is just always stay in the driver's seat. Just remember that you're always in control. You know, um, there's a lot that you can do to be confident, or as confident as you can be, and you're always in control of your job. You're never stuck in a job. You're never under experienced to be doing what you're doing. Um, the best thing you can do for yourself is just to do it, and to not be afraid to mess up. And you're supposed to be there. You earned it. If they hired you, you're there, man. Just do it. So yeah, rule number one: always stay in the driver's seat.
I like it. Confidence is absolutely key. I mean, it's been proven time and time again in thousands of different ways, right? But confidence, they talk about it all the time, and I think growing up too and being taught to be humble at times is almost conflating the idea of not having confidence, if you know what I mean. Like, being too humble, you always want to be humble and gracious, a gracious winner and a gracious loser, obviously, right? But being so humble to the point that you take a back seat to everyone else because you're like, oh, you just do you. I'll just, you go ahead, you do this, you do that. Like, just go ahead. I'll just be like, you don't want to step on anyone's toes in a way, right? You just want to take the back seat. And people conflate that, I feel like, with being humble and not having confidence, and put those in the same boat. At least I feel like I have in the past at times where I'm like, no, now I'm like, no, you're in the driver's seat. Like, be confident, be humble when you win, be humble when you lose, obviously, like I said, but have the confidence too to know that you're going to win, or you're going to do it, or you're going to fail, but you're not failing because you're just learning a new way that didn't work, right? And you're getting one step closer to winning. in whatever realm it may be in. Like, I think that's something that's really important is you should be humble, but you shouldn't confuse humbleness with a lack of confidence and just being passive in that way. You follow kind of what I'm getting at there?
I think what you just said is huge because it's such a fine line between those things. But one thing that I believe will get me the farthest in my career, aside from obviously number one is just having the best work ethic no matter what you're doing. But number two, you want to be liked by everyone. Like you said, everyone's good at something. Everyone has something to say. Don't write people off because you underestimate them. Just get to know everybody. Give everyone a chance. And I think that's a big part of being humble too. Is no matter where you stand in the workplace, you got to be friends with the CEO and friends with the janitor too. You want to get to know everybody, not because you feel like you have to, but just because you genuinely want to get to know them, and because they matter. They might not do something for you. Maybe they'll do something for you that you didn't even know. But I think being liked by everyone is being kind to everyone, and being humble is one of the biggest things that will contribute to your reputation. And that's what's going to get you ultimately referrals and lead to a lot of opportunities down the road, because who's going to want to refer somebody who's a total, they might do good work, but they're a total hothead and nobody can stand them in the workplace. To be honest with you, Matt, I'd much rather hire somebody that I enjoyed being around, that worked hard, than somebody who I knew how to do it, but is really stuck up. So I think that's also another rule number one.
For sure, yeah. And I like that you clarified being kind to everyone as opposed to being liked by everyone. You should be kind to everyone and give everyone a good opportunity to like you. But you also have to know that there's going to be people in the world who just woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day, and for whatever reason, whatever you happen to do, tick them off, and now they come off as they don't like you. Like, you don't need to bend over backwards to make everyone like you, but you should be kind to everyone still and give everyone every opportunity to like you. I think that's kind of, and you corrected it after the fact, but I just think that's a big differentiation there, in a way.
That's true, especially since you spend more time with the people you work with than you do your friends and your family. So even if you have nothing in common with them, if you can learn to like them and build a personal relationship with them, ultimately it's going to make your life a lot easier around too. It's going to make your life a lot easier too.
For sure. And moving on here, another thing that ties in with mentorship, but also that team building aspect that you were just talking about. What's your opinion on the solopreneur? So not entrepreneur, but solopreneur approach versus building a team. And how do you decide which path to take in your endeavors?
Personally, I would never pursue being a solopreneur, just because I think the more of a well-rounded team you have, and the more diversity and skill and perspective that you have, the more successful you're going to be, because the more people your business is going to relate with. I can say this myself, like Matt, when our business started up, I started as a senior project in one of my classes, and it was a constant struggle just trying to keep up and move it along at a sufficient rate, especially in areas that I wasn't as skilled in as the ones that I was passionate about. But after that first project, when you and our other associate Ben joined our team, you two both also have your own unique set of skills, and when we can all apply those to what we're best at, it's incomparable, the difference at the rate that you truck along. And ultimately, what's your goal? Do you want to be the solo owner of a $20-30 million business? Or would you rather be a minor owner in the same business that could get up to, $300 to $500 million? That's a totally random example, but, once you get going with something, it's a race. You want to go as fast as you can, both because people are going to compete with you, and because, scaling a business, that's the biggest challenge once you've proven your concept. So I think the more well-rounded and the more skilled people you have who are professionals in their own area and can focus on that, that's the best thing you can do for yourself.
I love what you said there about the example of being the majority owner of a million company or the minority co-owner of a $5 billion company, right? I just listened to something recently. Shout out to Alex Hormozy, by the way. Absolutely love his content. Probably consume more of it than I should, right? But I absolutely love his business content, entrepreneurship content, and just life content as a whole. So shout out to him, even though he's not going to see this. But any of you guys interested in looking to someone, maybe as a mentor, if you don't have a mentor in person in your life, I would recommend trying to find one. But then if you can't, Alex Hormozy has a lot of great stuff. And one thing I just heard him talk about, I mean, it sounds so simple, right? But would you rather have a small entire piece, an entire pie, right? A whole pie that's small, or a slice of a massive one, right? And he was talking about it in the sense of equity investment and versus debt financing, I should say, equity financing versus debt financing. But it works the same way. Anytime you're diluting ownership and giving ownership to someone else, you're talking about that. And that's when you have, as an entrepreneur or any founders, right? The same thing. You have to think to yourself, like, okay, is this person going to grow the pie as a whole? Because if I'm bringing them on and I'm just bringing them on to bring them on, and there's no particular reason, and I don't think that they're going to necessarily grow the pie that is my company, well, then, it might not be worth bringing them on, obviously, if they're not going to grow it at all, because then you are getting a slice of the same size of pie as opposed to the whole thing. But if you bring someone on strategically and they are effective in why you brought them on and what they're planning to do, well, then you might grow the pie 10x. And if you just split the pie in two, but you grew it 10x, I'll take those numbers every day, right? If I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a founder. So yeah, I think it's key. Solopreneur is interesting because I feel like a lot of things maybe start that way, just that initial grind. Like someone has to have the passion, like you could say you started out that way still, but you always get to a point where you need a team, at least a guy, another, or a girl, you need someone else, right, to help you. But eventually, if it gets big enough, you're going to need that team. You won't be able to do it by yourself. And I think that ties back into what we were talking about of being a likable person is going to help you build that team and grow that team much more effectively. And then also quickly as well, because like you mentioned, speed is also the name of the game in business, right? That is everything. You can be first to market, for example, our potential idea, but if you're first to market and you don't act on it, doesn't matter that you were first to market, right? The advantage of first to market is the speed that you go with it once you're there. So getting to the top, another thing that I heard from Hormozy, getting to the top is, relatively easy compared to staying on top. And that's what really sets companies apart for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like back to our last note, like just the stuff that especially, again, you and Ben being my partners, you both are just so good at what you do. It's like, I see, your work and it's like, yeah, I don't even know how long it would have taken me to do that. And nor do I even know if I could. So, yeah, it's been great. And, it's like you guys are just as engulfed in this idea now as me. And it's, I think something you and I were just talking about the other day is how lonely it can be, being an entrepreneur because of the grind that it requires, and the amount of sacrifice, what you have to give up, especially time with your friends or just, things you like to do. Again, it's about the delayed gratification and working towards something much bigger than what you're doing now. So especially when you're doing that with a team too, you don't have to sit there and motivate yourself. There's people doing the same thing with you. And when you're working towards a goal as a team, it's so much more empowering and motivating. And, you hype each other up and you talk about what it's going to look like in 10 years. And, sometimes whenever I'm feeling, having doubts or, whatever it is, or just down bad, hitting a wall, all it takes is a call to one of you guys and I'm just ready to run through a brick wall again. So that's another phenomenal part of it that people also don't consider as much.
For sure. I totally agree. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been like, is this gonna do this or is this gonna do that? Or the flip side, I'm so excited about something that then I have to call one of you or one of you guys call me, we talk about it. It's like, all right, keep your emotions in check a little bit, right? We don't want to get overly optimistic. We don't want to get overly pessimistic. I think that's really important with a team too. And they can, if you have the right team, of course, they can help you a ton in that aspect. And kind of tying right into this, and just a short answer, Matt, what are some things you do? How do you manage the work-life balance that comes and often becomes a challenge for entrepreneurs that are deeply invested in their ventures?
Yeah, that's a pretty easy answer. Just again comes down to prioritization. I know what's required. Like I start the week out by just mapping out how much time do I think I need to do the work that I want to do? Which days can I afford to stay late in the office? Which days will I have open to work on our business? And then, after that, it's okay, I want to get in the gym at least 2 to 3 times this week. And then also, what's going on with my friends. So it's easy to map out the week ahead of the time and just, if you have more free time, I like to overestimate a bit how much the workload is going to be. And then, you just fill in your free time with fun stuff and prioritize the bigger events, the social events and stuff like that too. And, you just got to map it out.
One thing I want to add, you said it's easy to plan it. It is, but it's also not, because a lot of people don't do it, right? Like, I think planning your day ahead of time or planning your week ahead of time is absolutely crucial. Like, some people really just don't work that way. Some people, but I think a lot of people would benefit from just plan it out. Just write it down, right? Write it down the night before what you're going to do tomorrow. Set your clothes out the night before for what you're going to wear tomorrow. And you don't have to waste that time. You don't have to spend any time just thinking or getting in your own head about, oh, do I want to do this or that? And it gets down to wasting time, really, right? Like, planning things out in advance is not hard, like you said, but it is crucial. And a lot of people don't do it because it is hard. Like, it's not hard, but it is, because you have to do it mentally. It's more challenging than it is physically.
And it's just about, you just got to commit and build up those mental calluses. There might be a last minute plan. Oh, your buddies say, oh, do you want to go, for beers after work today? But you've known since it's Friday, since Monday that you were going to go to the gym on Friday because it was one of the 2 days this week that you could. And, you're going to see them again the next day. It's okay. You got to commit to it, because if you can't keep your commitments, then you're just going to doubt yourself more in the future. So the more that you can just follow through with that, the more you're going to believe in the future that you'll be able to accomplish the things that you want to. David Goggins talks a lot about that, especially. He's again, listening to him will get you ready to run a lap around the world after one of his podcasts. But it's just about committing, following through, and just those mental calluses. When you don't want to do something, that's the best time to do it. Because if you don't want to do it, you're going to anyways, and then you also get that reinforcement that, darn right, I'm gonna do this because you did. And then, when you start seeing a return, it's one of the most gratifying things.
And it builds your confidence for the future too, right? And I love that you brought up Goggins, because that idea of you controlling your mind as opposed to being controlled by your mind, right? Oh, I really don't want to do it. I set my alarm. I said I was going to wake up at this time and I'm tired. I don't want to do it. Go back to bed. Controlled by your mind, right? No, I said I was going to wake up at this time. My alarm went off. I am going to do it. I know I'm going to be tired. And that comes with preparation too, right? That's, I think, an underrated aspect. You have to prepare for that. You have to be like, okay, I need to get up at 5:30 tomorrow to get the work done that I need to get done, whether it's a homework assignment for school or whether it's a massive business project, right? Or whether it's just anything. Okay, I need to get up at 5:30 and I don't usually get up that early. I have to prepare my mind and know that when I wake up, I'm going to make excuses in my head and be like, oh, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that, I don't want to do it. Like, you have to know that's coming, and that comes with preparation. And I think that's something that a lot of the people that talk about, just do it or just do this, do that, they don't bring up as much. And once again, not like I'm some genius or anything at all, but I think something that is helpful is that preparation of like, okay, I know it's going to be hard. I'm expecting that. And that's why I need to do it, right? And the last thing I kind of want to talk about, there's two kind of similar questions, Matt, but they tie together well. The first one, in an age of increasing automation, right? We're seeing automation everywhere, AI everywhere. Do you have plans to integrate artificial intelligence and machine learning into any of your businesses?
That's another interesting question. Really hot topic right now. My personal view on AI. Sometimes I wish it wasn't even a thing at all. But since it is, we don't have the choice. We have to embrace it, whether you're a fan or not. If you don't, you're just going to be increasingly setting yourself back. It's there. Take advantage of it. It's made the work that I do today, even for the firm that I work for now, exponentially easier. Even in some of my personal life, I use it, and it makes everything so much easier. Just don't lose your personal touch. Write those emails yourself to the people you know and who are expecting that. But at the end of the day, if you don't get on the boat, and you miss it, you're going to be so much farther behind. Especially since, think about it. Think about 1-2 years ago. AI was just being softly discussed, doubted heavily, and all of a sudden it kind of went from 0 to 100. There wasn't as much of a in between with it. It was kind of like when ChatGPT was a thing. It was they loved it right away, and it's everywhere. And each week there's so many new AI platforms, because now everybody's number one goal with it is to automate everything, and just make things simpler. So as it increases, you're only doing yourself you're only setting yourself back if you don't take advantage of it. So yeah, I absolutely do, but not to the point where I lose the personal touch. I don't want chatbots talking to my clients, or people being able to know that it's in place. But I think there's a lot of places where it can be a great advantage.
Yeah, I love that answer, and it's super interesting. Obviously, I am curious that you brought up the part about the emails, and the responses, because I was just listening to something recently that was talking about how there may come a day that someone calls and the person on the other end calls customer service. The person on the other end picks up, and the original caller says, "Hi, am I talking to a human or a robot?" And the customer service agent says, "This is a robot." And the caller is like, "Thank goodness, because now I know I'm going to get my question answered in the most efficient manner possible." And I heard someone say that, and it really struck me. I was like, wow, like that's crazy, but it's also not that far away, because they talked about with AI how it was going to take over, first it'll take over all the blue collar jobs and all the basic jobs, like repetitive tasks, this and that. Like the last thing that it'll take over will be the creativity. And there's plenty of people that have talked about this, but it's actually the opposite, right? The creativity aspect is the first thing that it's taken over, right? Writing original thoughts on paper, like whether people will argue they're original or not, or they're plagiarism or whatever, right? They are essentially original thoughts for the purpose that they're being used for. So those creative aspects, drawing pictures, like I can do a little sketch on, I think it's Adobe Firefly beta version. I can do a little sketch and then like draw some green on the ground and a blue line through it. And then I can tap on the green and it'll bring up all sorts of different grasses that I can fill that in with. And then I'll tap on the blue, all sorts of different rivers. Like it knows exactly what I'm drawing and can make a real life image out of it. And then you're talking about, pictures, media, videos, all being made just from AI. Like right now we're using AI to make it, but what happens when it's just AI making it? Like how will we know? Will we know? I don't know. It's crazy, and I don't want to spend the whole time talking about it here, but it is something that's extremely interesting. And I also love that you mentioned that the ship is going to sail, right? Whether you like it or not. I personally, I think a lot of things would be not simpler in terms of getting them done, but simpler in terms of, I think life would just be a lot simpler if I guess if you didn't have innovation ever, you could argue that. But if we didn't have AI, it'd probably be a lot simpler just knowing where to go or knowing what the future holds, right? But that's part of the beauty of life. You never know what the future holds, and it's going that way. Like all signs point toward that it's going that way. So you either hop on the ship now and try and better yourself with it, or you will probably spend a lot of time complaining about it in the future because you didn't take advantage of it. And I use AI on this podcast. I'm going to use it heavily because why would I not? It's just another form of leverage, right? Is it who is it that said, "You give me a long enough lever and I shall move the world"? I need to know this. Not it's one of the Greek gods or Roman gods, but essentially that's a quote, right? And it's, "You give me a long enough lever and I'll move the world," and that's what leverage is. So I'm really mad that I can't think of the person that said that. It's going to drive me nuts after this. First thing I'll look up, by the way, audience, in case you're wondering. Matt, last question I have for you here, and it ties in with AI too. In this rapid, technological advancement that we're seeing, how do you personally see? I know you talked about this a little, but how do you really see the future of AI and automation impacting entrepreneurs specifically?
I think the biggest tragedy of it is that, it's never been easier for an ordinary person to become exceptional without putting in any work at all, just by using AI. And, that especially, it starts in school, AI writing essays and all this and that, but people just aren't forced to learn, and you can get so far without doing anything. So I think it'll really separate, you know, the mediocre from the great, because people with that drive, some people are just born with it, and that won't be sufficient. If you people who have that drive to and always want to learn more, and be building yourself up, you won't want to use it for those things. But yeah, I think it's going to get awfully confusing as it gets better. Again, it's came so far just in the last year or two. The last chat GPT, I believe it's GPT-4 development, was you can train it on who you are, how you talk. They study what do you do for work. They look at all your emails. The more you talk, the more it sees you talk, the more it understands who you are, until it basically is another version of you. It might even pick up on your slang and your, consistent language, errors, whatever it is. And in a few years, who's to say we'll even be able to tell at all anymore? And that's clearly the way that it's going. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's some countries that are trying to outlaw it right now, across the world, and that want nothing to do with it. And it's just really interesting. I mean, America obviously is so all about it, and it can just do so much great, but also take so much away at the same time. But at this point, we don't have a choice. So I really don't think there can be much done, especially with, everybody having the opportunity. It's an entrepreneur at the end of the day created it, and they're not breaking any laws. It's there. So I don't think it's bad in itself. I think we should use it for what it's worth, and take advantage. But again, just keep in mind, who you are, and don't become just a robot yourself, and let it do everything for you, because again, your brain is basically another muscle. If you're not exercising it, then you're just you're losing it. So yeah.
For sure. 10 seconds or less here, Gendreau. What are your thoughts on schools being extremely against or promoting the use of something like ChatGPT?
I think
10 seconds or less.
I think there's situations where it could be helpful to certain projects, and certain where it wouldn't. But there's software now to detect AI. Teachers can run things through it. But then there's also software to counter that, so students can do that, and then it gets countered again. So I also think they're going to be really confused. But I just hope that there'll be enough good out there, and people with good intentions who will come up with software to keep students on their toes. And yeah, we can just keep hope that people will keep learning, even with that being an option. So
For sure. I see it very similar to the internet. They used to, ban you from ever going on the internet during anything. Now, pretty much everything you do is on the internet. I think it all comes down to how quickly they adapt it, and that using it as a tool to help you get things done, not just doing it for you per se, but using it as a tool to get things done exactly the way you want them quicker. I think in that regard, it's extremely innovative. And I think just like anything, everything has an equal and opposite potential for good or bad, is what I kind of think, right? If you have something small that doesn't have that great a benefit, well, it probably doesn't have that great of downside either. But if you have something like, think of nuclear power, right? You can build an atomic bomb that destroys the world, or you can build a nuclear power plant that powers the world, right? They're equal and opposite in that way, kind of, is the way that I personally think about it. And I kind of think that's how AI is too, right? It has a potential for a whole lot of good and it has a potential for a whole lot of bad. And we'll find out. We don't really have a choice because we're going to find out. But thanks everyone for tuning in. I thought it was really fun, Matt. I loved having you on. Hopefully I'll have you on again very soon. And yeah, I'm going to be pumping out these episodes and talking to the brightest, smartest business minds, entrepreneurship, money, everything that I know and that they know. More importantly, what they know. That's why I'm bringing them on. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you soon.